searching for the three main speakers Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. This woman's media file, I guess we'll call it, got passed along through like networking, and I sent it to the other gentleman that helped me program this whole convention, and it was hands down, we were like, that's it. And a couple people actually knew her personally anyway, but yeah, I was at work, I was listening, and I just felt her energy, her spirit through, like, literally coming through my phone. And yeah, can everybody help me welcome Janic?
Nowhere to put this. Just want to put my phone so I don't talk too long. Keep an eye on the clock. Hello, everybody. My name is Janic, and I'm an addict. Hello, and like everybody else, I want to thank the programming committee and the convention committee for asking me to come up here and to share a message of hope. People have asked me in the past, do you get nervous, when you're asked to share? And never am I nervous. And why? Because I love Narcotics Anonymous. And I'm so grateful for my life and the transformation that happened in my life and in my spirit, in my heart, that I could never do enough, so people say never say no to service, and that's what I believe in. You guys taught me that. I try to walk the walk, and so thank you for asking me. I was telling Danny and them yesterday, when I got here and I heard people say it's an honor and a privilege, I had no idea what that meant. And today when I say it, it really chokes me up because I know what that means today. It really is an honor and a privilege to come here and to just be with you guys, to travel and to feel the unity and to the word he said, energy, because from where I come from, to know that you guys, each of you didn't have the same experience, you may not have done the same things that I've done, but we have all felt the same feelings, and we hit a place where we wanted to be different, we wanted to be better. Wanted to do something in life other than use, abuse, and hurt ourselves and other people. I came to that point, I think it was like 60 days in a facility down in North Miami. I got to that facility straight from prison. I'd had a parole hearing, and it was... Even the parole hearing, you could feel the Spirit. I could feel the Spirit of God, because it was my third time back, and I was a second-time parole violator on a murder charge on a life sentence. So there was really no reason, especially in the state of Florida, for them to say, let's give her another chance. I had an attorney at my hearing who said, Janice is a good person who suffers from a disease that she's never been treated for, and I believe with help she'll become a productive member of society. And again, I know today it wasn't the mouthpiece, I know it was the Spirit that encouraged these people to send me to a place to get help. And, most people say, the best thing treatment did for me is take me to Narcotics Anonymous meetings. and that's really what happened. I was going to these meetings probably almost every day, and the readings we just heard is what I heard. And in the beginning, I had that feeling of not being comfortable in my skin, hated being in this facility, didn't know where my life was going. But I have the disease of addiction, so walking in that place, after, being graced with the opportunity to come there, my mind told me, I don't really need to be here. They're going to see how smart I am. They're going to see how, they're going to see that I don't need this. They're going to throw me out of here in a few days, That's that addict thinking, right? But reality was, I was 46 years old. I had been locked up 23 years out of the 46. Severely institutionalized. Had never really functioned in society. I went away when I was 17. I had one chance at parole and I went back. Got out again and I went back. The second time I went in, I was 26. I didn't get out till I was 42. So I was institutionalized, didn't know how to live, had never had a real life. But I like that addict thinking where I'm like, oh, I don't need this, I'm all right. I just need to go home. So I'm in these meetings feeling like that, like I don't belong here. Listening to the readings, it's like wah, wah, wah. And, but what do they say? Don't leave 5 minutes before the miracle, right? So thanks to the state of Florida and the Department of Corrections, I had to stay. So over time, I started to hear the readings. Who is an addict? Why are we here? And things started to kind of like, settle in. And one of the things that I always share is that it says we wanted something different and thought we found it in drugs. That stuck in my head, and I kind of dwelled on that, like, well, what did I want to be different? Because it was the first time my mind could conceive of like, it's about the drugs, but it's not about the drugs. I wanted something different. And I did some thinking, and I said, well, I wanted to be different because I didn't like who I was. I didn't like how I felt. I didn't like how I looked. I didn't like anything about myself. So drugs was the solution. Then I didn't feel like myself. I felt better. I thought different. And then I had to say, why did I feel like that? Why did I feel like I wanted to be different? And I wish I could remember this quote. A friend of mine, I'll say it differently, but she says her sponsor told her once, quit worrying about the drugs and figure out why you were running to the drugs. And it's a little different, but that's my tearing it up. And so I started saying, well, why didn't I like myself? And going back a little bit, my dad was an addict. He eventually drank himself to death. My mom was not. We were very poor growing up. My home group is called No Reservations. Meets on Friday night at 7 o'clock, and it's on the Indian reservation. So we just think that's so cool, And so I was raised up Native American from Florida, a Seminole tribe, and we have a few reservations in Florida, the land. And so we traveled around. We were poor. My mom made and sold souvenirs. We changed schools a million times because we moved with the tourist seasons. And what I remember is that nothing ever seemed settled, because we were always moving. my dad was a binge drinker. He could maybe stay clean for a year, 6 months, whatever it was. But at some point, he would disappear. Like they say, he went out for bread and never saw him for a year or two. That was my dad. So what I learned from that is that I guess that sense of like fear, insecurity, like you never know what's going to happen next. And another thing that my dad was he was kind of a happy drunk until he wasn't. And I remember him coming home, jumping on my mom for whatever reason, these, really brutal, scary fights they had. And there was 4 of us. I had 2 brothers and 1 sister. And we were probably like between 3 and 7. And we would all huddle in the corner crying and, and screaming at my dad to stop. And, one thing about my mom, she didn't just get beat up. She fought, she fought him. And it was very, as a kid, it was terrifying, really. And it was probably the first trauma that I experienced. And it was trauma because we were really terrified. And but what was interesting is the next day, either my dad or my mom might have a black eye, put on sunglasses, might be quiet, no talking, but everything would go along like nothing happened. We'd go to school or whatever we had to do, and he went to work, whatever it was. So, there was 2 messages going on. One is that fear, a huge sense, terrifying sense of fear. And then the other message was craziness is normal. It just, it's the way it is. Just go on like nothing happened. So there's fear, and then there's whatever you call that. I don't know, insecurity or craziness is normal. And, we went along, and again, we moved around a lot. But at some point, the next, thing that I know attributed to my disease of addiction, and I know that I believe, I should say, that I was born with the disease of addiction. I really do. But I also believe that there's things that happened in my life that kind of boosted it up along the way. And I was probably like 5 or 6 years old. I think it was before first grade. We're in a car. My dad's in the front seat with my mom and one of his drinking buddies. I'm in the back seat. And he molested me. And again, there's the trauma of that terror. There's a saying, paralyzed with fear. And I remember being paralyzed, like I couldn't talk, I couldn't react. And it was my first experience of learning how I adapted. It's what they call a trauma response. It's the paralyzing. It's the ability to numb it out, to go away in my head and not actually be in my body, just to not feel, just to go numb. So, this is some progression a little bit I'm talking about, because there's the fear, there's the craziness, and then there's the numbing out, right? And I never told my mom, never told anybody. So then there begins the secret, By the time I'm 9, my dad, I said, he was in and out as it was, but he eventually left. I guess I was like 8 or 9. And my mom met a new man, and I was a mama's girl. I'm going to tell you, I would do anything for her. She was my first higher power. She was my, hero. She was, and I think that's where my big people-pleasing traits come from, because I remember one time, she asked me to, I'm probably about 8, 7. She says, make me a cup of coffee. And back then it was instant, it was and I made her a cup of coffee. I remember bringing it to her, and she took a drink, and she goes, that is so good. And I felt like I had, saved the world or something, that feeling. Like my mom was my hero. And so when this man came into our lives, I thought, this is great. He's not going to be like my dad. He's going to help her. He's going to help us. Things are going to get so much better. And within a short time, he started to molest me. And again, the secret. How could I tell my mom, this will kill her? This will kill her, this will kill our family, this will, so I had to keep it a secret. But the feelings that came were shame. I started to feel ashamed. I started to feel dirty. The secret, I started to feel like anxiety. Again, the progression, the fear, the craziness, the numbing of my feelings, the secrets, the shame, it was just all leading up to where by the time I'm probably 11, and he stayed with us for a while. It was a couple of years. So during that time, I know for sure the shame and the guilt or the shame and the all of it kind of morphed into this anger. I started to feel angry. Even at my mom, I started to blame her, either consciously or subconsciously. And so the behaviors began. I started to smoke cigarettes with the older girls at school. I started to skip school and stuff like that. The behavior started, and I guess it was around 12, 11 when I first picked up. It was probably weed and alcohol. And, and then I knew I had the solution of how I felt, the shame, the guilt, the secrets, the dirtiness, all of that. I didn't feel like that anymore. So that's exactly where I know I wanted something different and found it in drugs. That's what that meant. Because when I got high, I was all right. I felt like I could joke and laugh and, hang out. And, my mom worked nights. She worked from 3 to 11 shifts. So we were on our own a lot. And we stayed out on the res and the older kids doing what they do. And, I learned all the stuff, how to be bad. And, by this time I'm like 12. And, all the stuff is already set up. The fear, the trauma, the craziness, the shame, the guilt, the numbing of my feelings, not caring. So the drugs did help. The drugs did change the way I feel for a while. But, we hear a lot that eventually the drugs stop working. By the time I'm 13 and 14, I've been kicked out of school. I've been to jail for stealing a car. I'm like out there. I'm crazy. I went away to boarding school, got in trouble there, got sent home, came home. And when my mom came to pick me up from the airport, she was crying. And for a moment I thought, I felt bad. And then I just kind of shook my head and I was like, oh well, In the back of my mind, I'm probably saying it's her fault anyway. Because I had to blame, I was a victim, because as a child I was a victim. But what also happened is I adapted a victim mentality. Like, my mind wasn't mature enough to say something's wrong with these people that hurt me. My mind said, what is wrong with me that this keeps happening to me? So I became a victim. I had that victim mentality. Instead of being a victim, I became angry and I victimized other people and other things, society, my mom. And by the time I'm 13, 14, I feel hopeless. I feel depressed. I have anxiety. I don't know where my life is going to be. Life isn't really good in my mind. So I said, the only way out of this is to kill myself. there's no reason. Like, my feelings just were depressed all the time. And the drugs didn't help anymore. So by the time I'm 15 years old, I'm just like, this is it. I'm going to do it. I don't want to live. I stole a gun and with the plan to kill myself. It was New Year's Eve, 1972. I'm 15 years old. And my brother had this little party. And everybody was leaving. And I said, when everybody leaves, I'm going to go in my room and blow my brains out. We were living in this trailer home that had belonged to my grandpa. And when he passed, we moved there. So I was going to do this. That was my plan. And in the middle of everybody was leaving except one guy came by and he said, can you run me up to the 7-Eleven? And I'm like, oh well, okay, after that. So I run him up to the 7-Eleven. I have the gun with me, and when we get there, there's one clerk. It's like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I had this great idea that I don't have to kill myself. I'm going to rob this store. I'm going to get all this money, and I'm going to run away. You know, my first, what do they call it? Geographic solution. And I said, if I just run away and I won't be here, it'll be better. And I tell my friend, and he says, no, what are you talking about? No. And I said, listen, just do what I tell you, it'll be fine. And we go back in, I'm robbing the store, and he runs out. 2 customers walked in the middle of it. I have this gentleman on the floor with the gun, and when my friend ran out and the 2 people walked in, I think I had a thought. And I'm telling you, this was a very, what do they call that? Out-of-body experience going on. I seriously can tell you that I felt like I was in the ceiling watching myself do this. And I think I thought, now that these people walked in, I got to kill everybody. And I shot the clerk. I shot him in the head and killed him instantly. And the sound of the gunshot was so loud that it woke me up. Like, I was in this some kind of like trance almost. And the gun went off and my ears started ringing and the sound is so loud, it's like I woke up and I just ran. We left. We got away. We didn't get, we didn't get arrested for a year later. I was 16. I turned 17 in jail, so I was bound over and as an adult, tried as an adult. And my lawyer advised me to take a plea because if I got convicted on first-degree murder, I would get either 25-year mandatory or possibly the death sentence. So I'm like, okay, whatever you say. Because I didn't care. I didn't care about me. I didn't care about you. I didn't care about his life. How could I value anything if I didn't value me? I didn't care about me. I didn't care if I lived or died. So life meant nothing to me. I had learned to numb my feelings a long time ago. I had learned to disassociate a long time ago. I had learned to become rageful a long time ago. I had become a victim, so I wasn't going to be a victim no more, and I didn't care about nothing. So he said, take a plea, you get a life sentence, but you'll be able to get parole within some years. I said, okay, fine. In the court, when I pleaded guilty, and the judge, he said, I remand you to the Department of Corrections in the state of Florida for a term of life. My mom broke. She started crying. My family. And for like one little split second, I almost felt it like. And then that feeling of, I don't care, I just said, oh well. And I went away for 7 years. I went away at 17. I walked into prison at 17. I left at 24. Back then, you could get paroled on a life sentence. I think the minimum was 7 years. And I tell people all the time, the disease of addiction was living in me loud and clear. I didn't walk into prison and say, "Where's the chapel? Where's the church?" I walked into prison and say, "What's up? What's going what?" And I got into everything. I got into trouble all the time. We learned how to make alcohol from the men prison workers that came through to do maintenance. And do this, do that. They'd throw us joints sometimes and shoot them a titty shot and stuff like that. I know this was the spiritual meeting, but it happens. And so, I lived the life of this, inmate, convict, and everything that was to learn, I learned. I did get a GED, but I didn't learn a lot other than how to, hate cops. And just a little sidebar. During this time, I think it was 1977. I'm in there a couple of years. I got there in 1974. And there was a girl I walked into this prison with. She had the mandatory life sentence, right? And her husband got the same thing. He was in a reception center up the road. Well, he escapes from this reception center, and he comes and he breaks her out of where we're at, right? He cuts a hole in the fence, comes in. She was on the early morning kitchen crew. So he comes into the kitchen with guns and he breaks her out and they take off. She had the mandatory life sentence. I had a regular life sentence. And it was in the news. They got caught 6 months later, but I just remember that. We walked in there together. And I'll tell you a little bit about her later. But anyway, I did the 7 years. Didn't learn anything. Got out. Went to work release. Thought that I didn't think. I was an untreated addict, in the throes. So I just did time and I got out. I go to work release. I don't even think I was there a month, and some girl said, "I got a joint. You want to hit it?" I'm like, "Yeah." I never stopped to think that I'm on life parole for a murder charge, and I'm on parole. And I'm in a work release center. I'm not even technically out of the system. And I get high. And I never thought that something was wrong with this picture. I didn't, and Tom said last night, play the tape through. I didn't even know there was a tape. You know what I'm saying? I'm 24 and I just got out, and I thought when you get out of prison or jail, you party, and within a short time, I just got off work release after a few months. I started freebasing from a friend who had been in prison with me and who happened to live in this town where I was work released to. And she said, "I got something I want you to..." She came off as, "I want to help you. You need to move. You need a ride. I'm here, blah, blah, blah." And I said, "Okay, cool." And one day she's giving me a ride and she says, "I want you to try something." And that's what it was. And I was off to the races, and from there I went to, the progression. Long story short, I violated my parole. I absconded from supervision. I quit reporting. I was like, in my mind I was a gangster. I was a bad, and I was not a gangster. I was an addict, untreated. And so I got arrested. I was out like 3 years. 2 years and 9 months. And I got arrested. So I have a parole violation on a life sentence. I remember specifically saying when I moved, it's against the law to move unless you ask for permission. But I moved and I was getting high, so I wasn't thinking about doing anything right. And I remember saying, I'm sure people have said this a million times, I said, "They got to find me." I had this saying, like I just very rebellious. Rebellion I know today is anger. It's a cover for anger. I was very angry. I didn't know that, because I was always the life of the party and joke and make everybody laugh. Everybody want to get high with me. But I didn't know how angry I was. You know, that rage as a kid for somebody putting their hands on me and hurting me, and you know how it morphed into that rage. You know, I was able to hide it with drugs. I was able to hide it with my personality, but you know, I didn't know I was angry. Mostly angry at myself, because I had that victim thing going on. And anyway, I get arrested, and I'm severely addicted to opiates, so I know I'm gonna be detoxing in jail, and I'm like, I just told myself I'm not staying here in the jail, right? And I called my friend. I said, listen, they let us out in the yard after dinner, and I'm gonna leave. I said, meet me by the road, and you know, I told her, I said, I'm not staying here. You know, like it's a bad hotel or something. You know, like I'm not staying here. And sure enough, after dinner, they let us out in the yard, and we had to line up to go back in. And as we're going back in, I go to the side, and it was 2 fences. I guess like an 8-foot and a 12-foot. I don't know. I didn't measure them. But then the second one had razor wire. And this girl had loaned me this heavy sweater. So that's the only reason I didn't get cut up on all this razor wire. I don't know how, because I was kicking dope and I was sick and I was... You know, the gift of desperation can work both ways, I guess, you know, because I was so desperate. I made it over them 2 fences, and I got hung up on the razor wire. I used to have a little scar here still from the razor wire, but I had double knee surgery, and so... the other scar covered the new scar covered the other scar. But anyway, I'm hung up there. My leg is caught on the razor wire, and I remember giving it a big yank, and I went boom and fell like a sack of potatoes on the other side. And when that happened, my glasses broke, and I can't see shit without my glasses. So I go taking off into these woods that was around the jail, and you know, my sense is all off now because I can't see. It's getting dark. And I'm like trying to figure out which way the road is, where I told my friend to meet me. And then my mind said, oh man, you've been out here too long. They probably already got the road covered. So I said, well, I just better hide out until it's all done. And, you know, this was my thinking, craziness. So here they are in the woods, the helicopters, the cops, everywhere looking for me for probably a couple of hours. Somehow I managed to hide out. It was a trash dump kind of, and I crawled up under some trash, and I stayed there for hours. I think it might have been a couple of hours. I don't really know. But I remember I had laid in an ant pile. And when I got up, you know, I was bitten up by ants, and, you know, and what am I talking about? Being reduced to the animal level, they say. You know, like, I didn't care about me. Like I said, I didn't care about anything. I was just like this crazy person. I had to get out of there. I had to go get some dope. I had to just crave that craziness, that addiction, you know. And I finally came out of there, and long story short is that I got caught. And when I got caught, within a couple of hours, they had found me behind a gas station. I was hiding in this empty van, and they had, you know, they brought all the cars and the lights and spotlights, and the guy said, Janice, I'm going to come in there, and I'm going to handcuff you, and I'm going to bring you out. He goes, I want you to cooperate. And I said, okay. And in my mind, I knew I wasn't going to cooperate. I'm just like playing the part, you know. And he comes in, and, you know, as soon as he walked up to me, I went for his gun, and then we went at it, right? And it's really stupid to fight the cops, you know. It's not a winning situation. And there's an old song that says, I fought the law and the law won, right? So they beat me up pretty good, and, you know, took me back to the jail, and I'll never forget it because they put me in an isolation unit that was probably about as cold as it was as here when I got here the other day. Like felt like 28 degrees in that cell, and I'm kicking and I'm shaking and I'm sick, and it's like horrible. And my mind saying, you know, this is how it goes. You, what's that saying? I don't know, it's some crazy, stupid saying about, you know, you take the good with the bad when you're doing wrong, you know, like chalk it up to the game or whatever they say, you know. So I'm like, okay. And what happened is I went back to prison. I had new charges. I was a parole violation, instantly reinstated the life sentence. I had 5 years for grand thefts. I had 6 years. They gave me 6 years for the escape. I guess it was a year for every hour that I was escaped. I was out about 6 hours. I got 6 years. And I went back. And I went back like I was 26. And my mind, this is how the addict mind works. It's just craziness. I said, oh, all right. So I'll go back. I'll do 4 years on the violation, maybe a couple of years on these side charges. I can do that standing on my head. What's the big deal? You know, and I go back. And my first hearing was 1983. I went back. And then my first hearing was in 84. And they said, Janice, the laws have changed a little bit. The guidelines have changed. And we are going to give you a presumptive parole release date 25 years from now. And what's going to happen is you're going to be reviewed every 22 months. And depending on your behavior, we're going to move that date. We can possibly move that date down. And, you know, and I always used to say, this is a screenshot of my addiction. When I walked out of that room and they said, you know, you got way over here, you could possibly come down to here. Possibly. Presumptive parole, right? And I walked out and probably the normal person would say, oh my God, I have to do everything right. I have to work that date down. I have to be good. My addict mind said, fuck that. F that. If I'm going to do time, whether I'm good or bad, it's going to be a while, obviously. I'm going to do this time the way I want to do it. And they're not going to tell me what to do. The rules don't apply to me, is what my head was saying. And it was like, F that, F that, F that. And so I proceeded to do the same things I did the first time. Got into every kind of trouble I could get into. I worked in the kitchen, so I made sure I stole everything that wasn't nailed down and sold it on the compound. Everybody liked to have garlic and onions to put in their ramen, you know. So remember Shawshank Redemption? If you needed something, I was the one that could get it for you. And, you know, in my mind, I was this kingpin dealing onions. And, you know, the reality is it was onions. And so in and out of lockdown, my date is actually going the other way because they're adding years for all the write-ups and, you know, lockups I'm going through. And so, you know, it's just a screenshot of the addiction. And here's what I learned here. And I got to tell you guys, you know, that I got here through a facility going to meetings. But my first meeting ever was in that prison. H&I, once again, yay! H&I came in and they brought the meetings to us. And to this day, I can remember most of the people that came. When I got out, many years later, the second time or third time I got out, I had the privilege and the honor to meet some of them, have dinner with them, speak with them, you know, share at a meeting with, you know. I'm just throwing that in to say that this story doesn't get worse, it gets better. Well, it gets worse first, but yeah, so the first meeting I ever went to was on the inside. But, you know, I went to these meetings and for us it was a meeting place. because they brought us from different dorms to the staff dining room for the Thursday night NA meeting. And we just went there to, to hang out with our friends and mess around, talk shit. But I remember hearing the message. The message then and today is the same. That any addict can stop using, lose the desire to use, and find a new way to live. And I heard that message. I heard these people share their stories. And I actually felt the energy. I knew there was some kind of spiritual energy to this. But I was so sick and in the throes of my addiction, I just said, that's an amazing program for someone who needs that. I never related it to me. And I remember a guy named Louis S., who said in his share, he said, these are treatment centers. I've been to Concept House, Spectrum House, your house, my house. He says, nothing ever worked for me except Narcotics Anonymous. I could hear him saying it to this day. He's passed on, and he was a real soldier in this fellowship. But again, I didn't take it. I didn't take it in, and I did a lot of time. And one day I said, you know what? Finally sunk in that my date is moving backwards. My life is going nowhere. I'm just going to be here forever. My family comes to visit me every other week. When they leave, I feel like crap. My mom was so diligent and so, out of the 23 years that I did in prison, my mom never missed a Thanksgiving or a Christmas. She visited me every holiday, Christmas and Thanksgiving, 23 years. We had a sandwich from the canteen. We had chips and a Coke. That was our Thanksgiving and Christmas dinner, but she never missed. And so when I'd have visits, I started to feel like crap. So one day I said, you know what? I'm gonna quit. I'm going to get better. I'm going to make an effort. I'm going to quit getting in trouble. I'm going to quit getting written up. I'm going to go to this. We had an in-house in the prison drug program. And I said, I'm going to get in this drug program. All these plans, right? I get in the drug program. It's segregated from the main unit or the general population. And I'm in there like a week or two, and somebody sends me a message. Oh, you remember? They said, person that sent the message says, I got that thing I owe you. It was dope, of course. And I said, there's the decision. What's the, normal person's answer? No, I'm trying to get better. I'm like, oh, okay. No thing. I said, oh, okay, send it over. And I got high, I got ratted out, and then you can't get high in prison without somebody knowing, and then they're jealous or they want some or whatever. Anyway, somebody told on me. I get dirty urine, and I go to the hole for 60 days. And I'm walking down the steps of this building. It's like a dungeon. It's like the Shawshank. It's got the tiers, and it's got it has cells, but they're steel doors. They're not bars. And there's a rectangular, hole. Some of y'all might be familiar with those things, right? And, they use a key, open it to put your tray in there. And I used to back up to that hole 3 times a week to get handcuffed and walk down to another cell that has a shower head. And we get 10-minute showers 3 times a week. And walking down these stairs, I knew what was coming. I'm going to go in this room. I'm going to lay down on this plastic mattress with this plastic pillow on this steel or concrete slab. And I'm going to lay there for 60 days. And I'm going to say, next time, I'm not going to do this. Next time, I'm going to do this. Next time, I'm not going to tell so-and-so. I saw myself. This is what's going to happen. This is your life. And walking down them stairs, something changed in me that day. And I always shared that growing up, my mom was a Christian. Her dad had been converted to fundamental Christianity when he was younger. And so she was raised in the church. She brought us to church. I was baptized at an early age in the Christian church. I knew about Jesus. I knew about God. And on my father's side, his family practiced the spiritual traditions of our native people. You know, his great uncle was a man named Josie Billy, who was one of our biggest medicine men in that time. So I grew up knowing that there was a higher power. I grew up knowing there was something greater than us. But, you know, in my journey of pain and disappointment and addiction, you know, I just turned my back on it. I just went crazy. So that day walking down the stairs, I had that moment of clarity where I said, "You're a convicted murderer on a life sentence. You're a parole violator, and you're never going to get out of here unless you change." And in that moment, I saw my life I saw the screenshot of the disease again. I'm never going to get out. All these things I just said. But in my mind, because it was my mission in that prison, every day that my eyes opened up, my mind said, how am I going to get over on these MFs today? Right? That was my mission. So when I had that moment of clarity, that's what I said. I said, never going to get out. And yet, here I am thinking, I'm handling these MFs. I got this. They don't tell me what, you know, I saw my disease thinking, I saw my disease. And I broke. I broke. And I cried out in my heart and in my soul to a God that I did not really have a relationship with, but I knew in my heart and spirit there was something greater than me that could help me. And I cried out to God to help me. Please help me. And from that day, I did my 60 days and I got out, changed my life. I walked in prayer a lot. I prayed a lot. I got transferred to another prison within a short time. I went to North Florida. And this isn't meant to be any kind of way, but I always tell this joke because I got there. It was the first time I realized there was black rednecks. I mean, a lot of the officers were real rednecks, white rednecks, but the black ones too. They chewed tobacco like everybody else, and just like treated me badly, and treated us like shit. And I'm like, wow, this is a real cultural shock. And the other cultural shock was I had been in a prison where we had rooms. They were like dorms with rooms, right? 2 to a room, 2 bunk beds, closet, could close the door. I got there and it was like a shelter. It was longer than this room, and there was a bunk, a locker, a bunk, a locker, a bunk, all the way down, like a shelter. That was it. And the officer station was at the end where they could see everything all the way into the bathrooms. And you had no privacy. At least in South Florida, we kind of ran the place. You know what I'm saying? We had, the officers were cool. They brought us stuff. You could always pull one. And it was, we kind of like felt like we had some comfort. I get there and again, culture shock. I was like, holy crap, this is crazy. It was a real prison. And a real prison. And so I said, man, I gotta stick with God. I gotta keep God close. And I remember my date that was moving back. Well, I had been getting reviewed, and it had moved down a couple of years. And I was coming up for a parole hearing. And I'm going to tell you this. There's a few times in my life, probably more than a few, that I don't know how to say it. You guys probably experienced. I heard the voice of God, but not like a voice, more like a feeling and a knowing. And I knew I was going to get out. my date didn't say I was going to get out anytime soon. The parole commission wasn't saying I was going to, but I knew I was going to get out. I was walking the spiritual walk and meditating. And I got an attorney who said, okay, Janice, let's calm down here. We could get your date maybe moved down 5 years and then we'll work on, more. And my mind said, you're not the lawyer for me. And I got another lawyer because he wasn't speaking the language of what had been revealed to me. I got another lawyer who knew nothing about it. I said, this is all you got to do, listen to me. And we went to the hearing and they gave me a date within 4 months. And I'm telling you, it was a God thing. My date was way back. I wasn't due to be released for at least 10 more years. They gave me a date for 4 months, and I got out after 16 years. Like I said, I went back at 26. I got out at 42, and my mind said, and I hadn't been getting high. I hadn't been, I was walking the spiritual walk, and my mind told me, all you got to do is stay clean and don't do crimes. That's it. You'll be great. And I did that for a while, and it worked. But I have a disease called addiction, which, is rooted in my head. It sits between my ears, and it can lay dormant for years, decades maybe. And I had not been treated for that. I just had become more spiritually inclined, and I thought I had it figured out. I considered myself smart, and I said, I'll handle this. But what happened is I didn't know about all the other issues, the PTSD, the anxiety, the depression. And what I did is I started working. First year I didn't work, then I got a job at my mom's business. I started running myself crazy. My brother's been a lifelong untreated addict. He had kids that needed to go to school. My mom had been helping him all this time with everything. So I kind of stepped in. I started running his kids to school. I'm working at the store. There's a thing that I take very seriously now, what we call HALT, right? Don't get hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Too much of this, not good for us. Not good for me. And that's what happened. I got overwhelmed, overtired, overstressed, and I started to get resentful. Like, why I gotta be the one to do all this? How come I can't, I became a victim again. I got really tired and real physically tired. So one day I'm getting supplies and I step into the gas station and I said, man, I just need a break, and I got a beer. Because we all say, well, alcohol wasn't my problem. Drinking don't mean nothing to me. I just needed to relax. I just needed a break. And from that beer, I think it could have been a week, 2 weeks, it could have been a month. But I got drugs, I got high, and I got in a car accident. I got arrested for DUI, possession of paraphernalia, violation of parole. And I went to jail. And I had been out 3 years this time. And, so that was real. It was almost like the disease of addiction was in the background, like dancing. Like, I did it. We got you. I got you. You're done. It's done. It's over. Because there was really no reason, like I said in the beginning, for the parole board to give me that break. And I had these new charges, the driving under the influence and the paraphernalia and all that. So I couldn't go back to prison with a new charge. That's an automatic revocation. So I took these charges to a jury trial. And, the Spirit was there. They acquitted me. They acquitted me of these charges, and I went back to prison with no new charges, and that gave the parole commission the leeway to send me to that treatment center, to give me another chance. And which is why I don't get nervous to share. Look what God has done in my life. These are true miracles. I'm telling you, the state of Florida, probably Texas, maybe here, they don't play. You know, they stamp your shit revolt and they put you back and they'll be like, we'll see you when we see you. So that's when my journey began. I walked into this treatment center and started going to meetings on the van, the little white van, the druggy buggy they call it. And I heard the message and I surrendered. And I said, you know, I need help. I got a sponsor right out. I was still in treatment when I got a sponsor. I started working steps, still in treatment with her. She'd pick me up. And one day in the group room, you know how they have the steps on the wall in the traditions? I don't know if they have them facilities here, but down there they had the steps. And two things happened. One is I saw the 8th and the 9th step. And my heart got very sad in my spirit. Because I said, this isn't going to work for me. How can I make an amends to someone that is no longer here? That I killed, that I took off this earth. It's not going to work for me. And I got very sad. And in group, there was this dude who used to do a group once a week. It's actually a psychologist. And in one of his groups, he had said in the past, he said, humans develop a conscience between the age of 1 and 6, I think he said, 1 or 6 or 7. He said, that's when kids, we learn what's right and wrong. I remember him saying that, so I went to him and I said, if we develop the conscience at that age, how come I didn't feel anything when I shot and killed this man? And he said, well, first of all, I didn't know that. And he said, second, do you want to do some work on that? And, you know, as soon as those words came out of his mouth, it was like this cold hand grabbed my heart and I felt fear and anxiety and like, what? My mind was like, what? And I wanted to say, hell no. And but I said, and I knew I was at a crossroads, and I said, yeah. So he said, this is what I want you to do. He said, I want you to write a letter. And then right away in my mind, you know, we're always thinking ahead. I said, I figured it was going to be like a letter to this man. This man's name was Charles. His name was Charles Henry Davis. I thought at the time of the murder, I thought he was an old man because I was 15. He was probably no more than 40. You know, just a guy working at a convenience store trying to make it. And in my mind, when he said, I want you to write this letter, I thought I was going to write a letter to Charles saying, I'm sorry, you know. But he said, I want you to write a letter to yourself as if it's coming from Charles. As if it's coming from the man you killed. And I thought I had a cold fear in my heart, but when he first said that, when he asked me if I wanted to work on it, but when he said that, it was like terrifying. I instantly thought, there's no way. What is he? What? You know, but you know, there comes a point that sometimes, you know, you're tired, sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I did not want to be this person that I was in this place, from prison, you know, I wanted to change. I said, okay. And it took me a couple of weeks, and every time I thought about writing the letter, I would cry. I would just break down and cry. I just didn't know how I was going to do this, because every time I even thought about it, I was going through waves of crazy emotions. And, you know, I know today that it was the feelings that I never felt that most people feel if they do something so horrific. You know, I felt guilt. I felt remorse. I felt shame. I felt terror about it, you know, and I'm crying. And somehow I sat down and was able to write this letter. And within a week or so, he asked me, did you write the letter? I said, yeah. I want you to read it with our group of recovering addicts. And I was like, oh God, what next, you know? And but I did, because there's a spiritual principle in our on our steps called courage. You know, the courage to change the things I can, right? So I surrendered, and I read it in this letter in the group. And this letter, you know, it was really short and simple, but it did change my life. It changed my life. And the first line of this letter, as I read it in the group, said, Janice, I know how you and I crossed paths that night. First line of the letter. And as soon as the words are coming out of my mouth, coming from the Spirit, I would say now, I knew instantly, that Charles is somewhere. His soul. I killed his body. I didn't kill his soul. And it's somewhere. And through the teachings of Christ and the teachings of the tradition of our people, I believe in that the soul is alive. Through other means, I have come to believe that we return to the source from which we come. And I believe at the moment of death, we know everything. I used to say, this is crazy, but I used to say, at the moment of death, I'll know if there was another shooter on the grassy knoll where President Kennedy was shot. Remember that great mystery? I used to say that. When they say, I come to believe that at the moment of death we know everything, because we return to the never-ending and the, no beginning, no ending, the never-ending energy of knowledge, of wisdom, of love. And I knew that the moment he died, he returned to this source. And when I read that line, I know how you and I crossed paths that night. I know that he saw, he could see, he knew my father beating my mother. He sees me. He knows that I was molested. He knows that I developed this rage, that I was angry, that I was a victim, that I hated me and I hated everything. He knows all this. He knows how I got there. You know how we say we didn't become addicted in one day? I didn't get to that store at 15 years old in one day. It was a process. And Charles, in that moment I read that line, I knew he knew. And I felt the spiritual principle of compassion. That his spirit could actually feel compassion for me. And the second line said, and I'm not mad at you. And I knew, being a part of God, being a return to the source of love, of all things good, he could forgive me. He could forgive me. Because God can forgive. That same psychologist used to say, God is the only one that can truly forgive, because God can forget. We as humans, we may be able to forgive, but unless we can forget it, we can't truly forgive. That's what he used to say. But he said God is the only one that can truly forgive. And Charles, being a part of God, he could forgive me. And I believed that in that moment. And the last line said, and I'm not dead. I'm just not here. Right? So, again, in the moment, it was revelation. It was spiritual vision. It wasn't me as a human being, Janice. It was a spiritual realm that I was in, reading this letter. I know it to this day. There's other spiritual realms that I've been in that I know, as we say. And growing up, the traditions of the Seminoles, not just our people, but we bury our dead facing the west, because we believe the spirit is going to walk towards the sunset, into the sunset. So I believed in an afterlife. So I knew that he could be. I knew that he was. And I knew that he could forgive me. I knew that he knows how I got to where I was. And you would think that after I read the letter, it would all be released, right? But no. After I read it, I started to cry and I started to feel worse. I felt the remorse. I felt the horror of what I had done. I felt I took the responsibility and it didn't feel good. And I was crying and crying, and I said to the doctor, I said, but what am I going to do now? I'm just crying. And he says, Janice, he said, the only thing you could do is turn a negative into a positive. He said, it's like the serenity prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. You know, I always say I couldn't do enough time. I couldn't shoot enough dope. I couldn't hurt myself enough to change anything. What's done is done. What I did is what I did. I have to accept it. Accept the things I cannot change. The courage to change the things I can. And the courage was writing this letter. The courage was going to meetings when I had severe anxiety. I remember sitting in the car, and it was a room with windows, and I could see everybody in the meeting. I would start to sweat, and the heart rate, and I had anxiety. I had social anxiety for a long time. I am so much better now. And I would sit in the car and I'd just say, I can't go in there. I can't. So the courage to change the things I can is I can. I can walk in that meeting. I can, how do they say, participate in my recovery. I can speak. I can share. I can have the courage to be honest about things. That's tough for me. I was lying and stealing was my favorites, And so the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. The wisdom to know the difference has evolved. I always share, I didn't say it in the beginning, but I believe in my heart and soul that recovery is a spiritual evolution. Remember Mission Impossible, they say, should you decide to accept it? You accept this mission. It is a spiritual. My walk here is on earth, is a spiritual evolution. It may come in a drip. Sometimes it may come in a flood. Sometimes, sometimes we have revelations that are life-changing and overwhelming. Sometimes it may just a little thing I read and it sticks in my head, but it helps me to evolve. It helps me to center myself in the Spirit. So that's really like the long and the short of it. Through the 11th step, trying to live in the 11th step has offered, given me the opportunities to study different things, to be open-minded to different things. And so I always say, my God is not the God I had when I walked in here. My God is not the God I had 5 years ago. When we talk in evolution, we're talking about change. We're talking about growth. We're talking about progress. Diseases. I remember somebody, I just want to tell you, nothing I'm saying is probably original. Because I got here, I didn't know nothing. I knew how to get in trouble. I know how to do time. I knew how to hurt people in society. I didn't know how to live. So everything I'm sharing with you, I learned here. Through this fellowship, through your spirits, through your energy, through the grace of God, I have learned a little something. And it is an honor to come and share that with you, because I wouldn't have it if you didn't share it with me. So what I'm saying isn't original. I went to this spiritual teaching, this guy from the East, India. He was having this workshop. And a lot of people, and he took some questions, and a lady said, there's so many different religions and so many different beliefs. How do I know which is the right one? And he says, It's got to look at it like a house made of glass. All the windows are made of glass. He said, the sun is going to shine through all these different windows. But it's still the same source. Still the same sun. Still the same light. So this is where I have come to believe, like, Tommy was talking about it last night. Feeling the spirit in nature. You know, a lot of people can connect through nature. A lot of us connect through service, right? In my, you know, next month I'll have 22 years clean in this fellowship. That's a freaking fracking miracle, right? And I have so much respect and love for this fellowship, the steps, the people, and in my journey, I have been asked to travel and share at different places. And I remember in San Fernando, I had the opportunity to hear Machete, Danny Trejo, speak. I think he was celebrating 50 years that time. Anyway, I'll never forget what he said. And amazingly, it was the same thing I heard years prior when I was like 2 years clean. There was a convention in Hawaii, World, right? The Seminole tribe, they're very supportive of the recovery community. And they sent like a dozen of us out there to the convention. They sponsored us. And I had the opportunity to hear him then. And he said it again. He said, he told this story and how told him to go help this guy. And the guy happened to be in the movie business. And eventually, you know, how he got into the business. But he said, in Hawaii, and he said it again in California, he said, anything good that has ever happened to me was the result of me trying to help someone else, right? So that is the spiritual hit of it all here, right, for me. I suffer from the disease of addiction that says, it's all about me. It's selfish, self-centered, self-seeking. And the antidote to this is spiritual. I have to be able to evolve to a being that cares about other people, that wants to help other people, that does for other people. So this is my simple spiritual walk. I don't try to complicate it too much, you know. I do service. The first home group I had, I shared with my cousin. I said, I did the coffee for 3 years. We hate change, right? You know, and they wanted me to hand it over. They said, spirit of rotation. I said, no, nobody's going to do it as good as me. They're going to mess it up. You know, I was new, so I did that. Then I did, I've always had a service position. I'm just going to say that. And it's always been, it fits. I know, friend of mine, Nancy, they call her Biker Nancy back home. She had the commitment at the prison I was in, the Broward Correctional Institution for Women, west of Fort Lauderdale, out on the edge of the Everglades. That's where I did 12 years straight before they transferred me, right? And she had the commitment out there, the H&I commitment. She used to say, I probably had about 3-4 years clean. And she used to say, oh man, I wish I could get you to be a speaker, speak for me out there. I said, oh, they'll never let me in there. I said, you got to be out of prison for so many. You got to be out at least 5 years, and I'm on life parole. They're never going to let me back in there. And she had more faith than me, and she put me on the list, right? And she calls me one day. She said, guess what? I said, what? She said, they approved you. I'm like, no effing way. And she said, I'm still on parole. I haven't been out 5 years. You know, God is so crazy, right? He's so good. And she said, yeah. I said, no way. She said, yeah. So long story short, we went walking in. It's like a half a mile of a walkway with a razor, the whole thing. And we get in there. And the drug treatment dorm is on the compound, so we had to cross the compound to go to the dorm where the drug treatment program is. And as I'm walking across, people see me that know me, and they're saying, "Janice, it's Janice!" And they're like waving at me, and the guards are like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa!" And I'm like, "Hey, everybody!" And it was a few people, not a lot of people, because a lot of long timers are still there. And we go to the dorm. And there's people in there, women in there that knew me from back when. And they're all like, "Oh my God, it's Janice." And I share my message. And we laughed, and we talked, and we cried, and it was just an amazing experience because I was able to say, if this program can work for me, it can work for you. Because all we could share is hope, right? Can't make anybody do anything, but we could share hope. And when we walk out the Sally ports, boom! We walk out to the car, and it's sunset. And the Everglades is right there. The sawgrass and the sun is setting. It's orange, it's red and yellow, and it's beautiful. And there was a spirit, like electricity in the air, and we're standing by her car, and we're just like, I looked at her, and I said, "What just happened?" And she said, "It's God," And it is one of the times in my life that I knew I was in God's will. To share a message, to give back, to try to do the right thing. And I'll finish with this. That girl the guy he come and broke her out of prison when I first went in, the two gangsters. I was a wannabe gangster. She was a real gangster. They had robbed the store, I believe it was in Dade County, Miami, her and her husband. They was real gangsters. And they were robbing, I think it was a grocery store. And the cops came, they had a shootout, and the cops killed an innocent bystander. They got charged for the murder, and they both got mandatory life sentences. This is how I met her. We walked into prison together in 1974. She was in her early 20s, I was 17. And we hung out. We made hooch together. We smuggled weed. We were like, and she escaped, and, she got caught and got more time for, they gave her 15 years for escape running wild, which means consecutive to her life sentence, which means she would have to do 25 years, possibly get paroled on that, and then start serving the 15 for escape. Because they were really pissed at them for escaping like that and making them look bad, right? So, there's her, one of my old running partners. And then there's another one, Bernie. Bernie was, I'll tell you what it said in the newspaper. The detective said, this was a girl who was not going to go to the senior prom. Her mother was a crack addict. She had been raised in institutions, in and out of group homes, foster care, all of that. She was going to jail and detentions at an early age. She came to prison probably at the age of 17 like me. Just bullshit crimes and stuff. And in and out. Spent her youth in and out of prison. A year here, 2 years there. And the last time she got out, she got in a little trouble again. She had to be in her mid-20s at that time. Wasn't that old. The judge had told her, I'm going to put you on probation, and I'm going to tell you right now, if I see you again, it's not going to be good. She wasn't on probation that long. She met a girl, and they started robbing tricks. They went to the strip joints and picked up guys, took them to hotels, and was robbing them. Aside from that, they were also doing home invasions. And, she was a pistolero. She liked carrying a gun. She thought she was a gangster. And they shot a couple of the guys in the house. So there was those attempted murders. And then the last thing they did is they tried to rob this trick and shot him. They thought they killed him. They got away. He lived to tell. Long story short,
the judge gave her 5 life sentences because he said, I never want to see you here again. She got life sentences on robbery, attempted murders, and, robbery carries life in Florida. And she got 5 life sentences. Another running partner of mine. So her and the other girl are still there. I got out 1999, went back in 02, went to treatment in 03, picked up my white chip at a meeting called Just Listen, March of 2003, right? They're still there. They're probably never going to get out. Last I heard, one of them has cancer. And they didn't kill anybody. I took someone's life and I got out of prison 3 times. And there is no answer to why sometimes, but this I know for sure. I'm not special. It wasn't me. It's because God wanted for me to be here today, January 23rd, 2025. If you guys, one of you was planning to leave early, but you decided to stay, for whatever reason you're sitting in your seat today, the reason I got out of prison 3 times on a murder charge is to be here today at this moment to share a message of hope with you guys. So I'm so grateful that you're here, and thank you for letting me share.
Can we thank Janic one more time? Will an addict please come up and read Just for Today?
Hi everybody, my name's Eddie. I'm a recovering addict. Just for today, tell yourself. Just for today, my thoughts will be on my recovery, living and enjoying life without the use of drugs. Just for today, I will have faith in someone in NA who believes in me and wants to help me in my recovery. Just for today, I will have a program. I will try to follow it to the best of my ability. Just for today, through NA, I will try to get a better perspective on my life. Just for today, I will be unafraid. My thoughts will be on my new associations, people who are not using and who have found a new way of life. So long as I follow that way, I have nothing to fear.
Can we get a moment of silence for the addict who's still sick and suffering, followed by a surrender prayer? God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference.